Welcome to my channel. In my today's video, I'll talk about context engineering, prompt engineering, and I'll try to give you ample amount of information on prompt engineering and context engineering. If you have ever tried using ChatGPT or Copilot at work, you know this already. Sometimes it gives you very good response, a kind of golden response, which you can easily use in production environment. And sometimes it gives you not at all useful information. Why? Why such differences? Because how you talk to AI matters, and the environment you set up around it also matters a lot. So these things makes a lot of difference when you are putting in some prompt to AI and trying to get response out of it. Today, we are going to break down two terms which every engineer should know: prompt engineering and context engineering. Think of AI like a developer. If you give them a vague ticket, you will get some vague results, definitely. But if you give them a clear Jira ticket to work upon and set up the dev environment and the coding standards, also the CI/CD pipeline, and create a well-defined documentation, then you will get code that actually works in production environment. This is the difference between prompt engineering and context engineering. By the end of this video, you will see why prompt engineering is like writing a good Jira ticket, but context engineering is like building the entire dev environment around that ticket, which developers can use. Now, let's start with the wonderful post with Andre Karpathy has met recently in X. After Andre's post, a number of different channels started talking about context engineering. And context engineering all at a sudden got lots of gravity and attention. What he says is something which we already know. Prompt is something which we use in our day to day activities, but context engineering is something which we can consider as a delicate art and science of filling the context window with just the right information by means of which we can get the production ready code, we can get the production ready response. That is what the context engineering is. So let's start our learning with a simple example. Now let's start with the definition of prompt engineering. So what prompt engineering is? Prompt engineering is about crafting the exact input you give the AI. Think of it like writing a Jira ticket or a commit message, maybe. If you are vague, you will confuse your teammate. But if you are precise, you will get the output you want. You will get your desired output like the way you're expecting it. Now, the prompts could be good prompt or bad prompt. For example, if you are expecting AI model to create a Python code for database, and if you write a Python code for database, then it's not a good prompt. It's considered as a bad prompt. What could be the better prompt for this? You can say, write a Python script that connects to a Postgres SQL database. Also, it retrieves all users from a users table and prints them in JSON format. This can be considered as a good form prompt, a better prompt. Now, why it's considered as a better prompt? Because the second one is clear. It's scoped and it gets you closer to what you want. Prompt engineering is about that only. Prompt engineering is about crafting that single instruction in a proper way. Prompt engineering is really about how well you phrase the question. But here is the problem. Even the best prompt can fail if the AI doesn't have the right context for it. And that is where context engineering comes. Now, let's start with the definition of context engineering. Then we will talk about some of the use cases which can be built on top of context engineering and can see the better advantage of context engineering. Now, context engineering is about building the whole environment that surrounds your prompt. It's not just the question, it's the rules, the memory, the external knowledge. Also, it involves the guardrails to maintain all sort of safety and security standards. For example, if I talk something in IT terms, then you give some instruction. Say, for example, if I talk about development scenario, then some instruction which you can pass, which you can let developers know, hey, follow PEP8 standards, also include type hints. Also, you can just think about maintaining some sort of past memory. I'm sure when you use ChatGPT, you have seen that ChatGPT session even remembers your discussion in past. You close it today, you open tomorrow some other session, but still the other session remembers information or context about the previous session. Some memory. Also, retrieval is pretty much important. It has to pull information from some tools by using some API calls. Also, guardrails plays a vital role. It should not suggest any destructive command to you. This is what context engineering is. Context engineering says you are not just asking the AI for help, you are giving it same environment and guardrails you would give one engineer who joins in your team. With context engineering, the AI doesn't just generate code for you, it generates code that fits into your ecosystem as well. Now, let's understand this with some examples as well so the things becomes even more clearer for you. Now, let's consider about one prompt which you are giving, being a DevOps engineer. You say that I want to write a Docker file. I want to create a Docker file. Now, in order to create a Docker file, what you say, you give a prompt and say, write a Docker file, maybe for a Python Flask app. You have given the prompt, and in return, you got some output, some response. This response looks perfectly fine, isn't it? But there are some problems in this prompt. The image which will be created by this Docker file is huge. Also, it runs as root. It doesn't pin dependencies and it completely ignores your company's security standards. It's like code that compiles but fails the code review. It may work on your laptop, but it is going to create a mess when it's going to production environment. Not quite the same thing how you can refactor by using context engineering. Now, if you add some context to it, you tell to AI, always use Alpine image, never run as root, expose port 8080, install dependencies from requirements.txt file, then everything changes suddenly. What you're doing here, you are giving some message, some system message, where the message is always use company specific Alpine image. Maybe you are putting some guardrails also, never run as root. Also, you are saying, okay, fine, have some retrieval as well, wherein you can just check for company's internal Docker file template. This makes the difference. This Docker file fits directly into your company's pipeline. Here, context engineering didn't just improve the Docker file, it made it deployable at scale. Now let's talk about one more use case. Being a DevOps engineer, you have to deal with Kubernetes deployments a lot. Now, think about some Kubernetes deployment of Node.js application. Now, what you're doing here, here you are saying you're giving a prompt, write a Kubernetes deployment for Node.js. In return, you will get something like this. This runs fine in Minikube, but in production, again, it's going to create a mesh. Why? Because it's not having any resource limit. It's not having any health probes. It's having wrong image source as well. And there is not even any logging support if you see properly. Now, how we can improvise it with context engineering? Now, let's add some context to it, where you say our company requires CPU and memory limits, a readiness probe also, and a logging sidecar as well. With these rules in context, the AI generates a much better response. So, what you have done again, you have mentioned the org standards, you have mentioned guardrails, and you got a much better output. Yes, so context engineering gave us something we could actually deploy to production cluster. There could be multiple other use cases also. You can think about some use case for log troubleshooting in microservices, wherein when you give a simple prompt and say and put in the error message which you got from your system saying connection refused at DB service, some service, then the response which you make it is the database connection failed. You just check if the DB is running. But if you give a proper context, you mention the service dependency graph, you mention the MySQL to maybe Postgres migration, and maybe if you mention some of your DevOps rules, then the response which you get from AI is much different. What I mean to say is, based on what sort of context you are putting in to your prompt, your response improves and it becomes more production like standards, more production ready response. So prompt engineering is like writing a good Jira ticket or crafting the question properly. But if you talk about context engineering, it's like shaping the environment. It's like setting up the dev environment, repos, standards, pipeline. So every output actually works in production. Now, if you are an engineer building with AI, don't just stop at prompts. Think context. because context is going to add lots of values in terms of memory, in terms of retrieval, in terms of system rules. Also, it's going to add some guardrails. That's how AI becomes not just a chatbot, but a true teammate in your software development process. This is what I wanted to explain as a difference of context engineering and prompt engineering. If you feel as if my video, this session is helping you to understand, has helped you to understand the difference, hit on like button. And if you feel as if this can provide information to someone else, please share my video with others. Thank you, everyone.